Somewhere in the early evening yesterday, President Donald Trump had the U.S. coordinated airstrikes on Iran's nuclear architectural sites at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Those strikes were hit, and he said they were completely and totally obliterated. That was put first into a tweet or a Truth Social, whatever you call that, in the message given out there. At about 10 o'clock Eastern time, basically the final hour of prime time before they go to network news, all networks, all TV networks, and all of the actual CNNs and MSNBCs and all of the networks, cable networks, went to a briefing, a very quick briefing, about 6 minutes, on Donald Trump. He stood out there with his vice president, Secretary of Defense, and his Secretary of State to announce to the world of what happened, essentially giving a rundown what happened in his voice. Advanced buster bunker bombs and Tomahawk missiles were used, marking the first U.S. direct strikes on Iran in this escalation happening, starting with Israel going forward as Israel and Iran, are shooting things back and forth against each other, which means the Tomahawks got shot from ships, so ships were obviously not in any harm's way. But essentially the 2-week deadline that he gave to Iran for some sort of negotiation was all a ruse. And it worked fairly well because within a couple of days, the bombers flew over Iran and took out the sites, per President Trump. Now, Iran has responded with a volley of around 20 ballistic missiles targeting Israel, as you expect. It injured about 16 people in this volley overnight, or technically early morning by that time. Israel then carried out a retaliatory airstrike against Western Iran to save face, with Iran calling an emergency UN Security Council meeting to warn the U.S. and its presence about escalating the everlasting consequences. Essentially, now they are rattling their sables at us because now we are stepping into it, literally. Trump hailed the mission as a major success and warned Iran not to retaliate against the U.S. or else, basically. Republican lawmakers largely supported the action, but there was a bit of issue with what happened. Now, Donald Trump alerted the House and Senate leadership, the leaders of the House and the Senate who are Republicans, of what was going to happen, essentially giving them most of the plans. After it happened, he gave notice to the Democratic leaders. Essentially, Hakeem Jeffries didn't know what happened until after it happened, and he did not do what is normally customary. Go to the Gang of Eight, which is a group of leadership folks on both sides in both Congress and the Senate, where they just sort of keep the peace among themselves, basically police what's going on. And obviously he didn't ask Congress for permission to do this. Now, he hadn't quite said why he had the permission to do this. That wasn't really said in the 6 minutes he spoke yesterday. There will be more going forward, and a press conference this morning about 8 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, I believe, at the Pentagon with Pete Hegseth to go over the details. So we'll have more real details of what was being put together and maybe some clarity on how we got to where we are. Iran maintains the damage is limited and recoverable. Of course, they'll say that, asserting that the nuclear program will go on, which, of course, it will say. The International Atomic Energy Agency reported that no radiation leaks are seen. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi emphasized that diplomacy is over and that Iran reserves all options to defend itself. Remember, there was a 2-week window given, essentially, in about 2 weeks to figure out some sort of diplomacy. And then about 3 days into that, the bombs dropped from the U.S. So obviously, that diplomacy wasn't going fast enough or really wasn't expected in the first place. And the United States, with very much happiness coming from Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu, is now engulfed into this action that Israel did start. Israel may have started it on purpose and for a purpose that was stopping a purpose. But now we are definitely engaged in what's going on. If there is any back and forth, we'll have to see what's going on. If there's anything going on, we may have to own something that we may have actually broken. Now, remember, the strikes may delay Iran's nuclear capability and actually get some way to enforce a ceasefire, a peace agreement, some sort of non-bomb throwing between Israel and the Iranians for the moment, maybe forever, for the moment at least. The problem is further escalation from the wider conflict. Backlash from many global leaders who are now calling for the restraint, trying to figure out what's going on. And the powder keg that is the Middle East. One commentator last night basically said what he believed, essentially going back to Desert Storm, when we rolled into, as Geraldo Rivera actually, he said we rolled into Desert Storm and he rolled out 11 years later and nothing changed. Literally, we went there to fight an ideal, terrorists and evil and stuff like that. And when we left, the vacuum just filled back into other things. So we have to be careful about what we do. Now, does this seem like an action that I would support? Actually, yes. Am I a bit disturbed about the person who is leading the action and speaking the words? Definitely yes, because we don't have the most eloquent guy up there, and we're not sure exactly where his whims are as you follow what he does for policies. However, if Iran is close to a nuclear weapon and we cannot trust them in this moment, however, one of the reasons why we can't trust him is that there was a deal they were actually sticking to that he pulled out of and did not fix. It is what it is. Intervention, I'm okay with when it does make a difference. The problem is when you start dropping bombs on people, you start creating people who are going to dislike you for generations, even if you're saving themselves from themselves. We'll see how this one plays out going forward. This is being recorded at 6 in the morning Central Time, so in about an hour or so, there may be, after I drop this, about an hour or so, there should be a Pentagon briefing on what is going on and what was happening, what the future actions are. We'll see how that plays on. And of course, there will be words from Iran, words from Israel, words from the world, and all morning long on the actual live morning shows. They're doing live news all night long to cover this stuff because it really is that big. We'll definitely hear from folks like Hakeem Jeffries, AOC. Margie Taylor Greene is saying this is not our fight. Some people on both sides are saying this is not where we should be. We will see where we're going to be fairly soon in this action.